Hello, my YouTube family and friends. Welcome back to Crime Whispers. I'm so glad you're here with me today. I know many of you use these videos to unwind and fall asleep. So before we begin, make sure you're cozy and relaxed. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. I'd love to know where you're from and what time it is for you right now. Now, let's dive into Case 1. The chilling origins of Paul Bernardo, a broken home. Paul Bernardo grew up in an affluent yet deeply troubled household. His father, Kenneth Bernardo, was the son of an Italian immigrant who had built a successful career in the marble and tile industry. In 1960, Kenneth married Marilyn, and the couple settled in Scarborough, Ontario. But the marriage was far from happy. Within weeks, cracks began to show. Kenneth turned physically abusive, and Marilyn spiraled into depression. Seeking solace, she rekindled a past love affair with a man her family had once forbidden her to marry. This affair led to an unexpected pregnancy, and on August 27, 1964, after a difficult birth, Paul Bernardo entered the world. A house of secrets Marilyn stayed with Kenneth, and the family of 5 lived in a middle-class home in but behind closed doors, the house was a prison of misery. Marilyn, drowning in depression, retreated to the basement, leaving Kenneth alone in the master bedroom. Paul and his siblings were bullied at school for their unkempt clothes, poor hygiene, a reflection of the neglected home. Desperate for an escape, Paul threw himself into the Boy Scouts, finding brief moments of normalcy. But darkness loomed at home. Kenneth, a predator in his own right, prowled the streets at night, peering into young women's windows. By 1975, his perversions escalated. He was charged with molestation. Worse yet, Kenneth began sexually abusing his own daughter, Debbie, and the family knew. Paul, his brother Dave, even Marilyn, they all saw it happening, yet no one stopped it. The truth comes out when Paul was 15. A vicious family argument revealed the truth about his parentage. He was the product of his mother's affair. Enraged, Marilyn turned on him, calling him the bastard child from hell, and blaming him for her ruined life. The revelation shattered Paul, desperate to fit in. He masked his pain, but the damage was done. The making of a predator the next summer. Paul took a job as a camp counselor. On the surface, he was kind, attentive, the perfect role model for kids. But beneath the facade, something sinister was growing. For years, Paul had been hoarding pornography, his obsession warping into something darker. Like his father, he began stalking women at night, peering through windows, feeding his twisted fantasies. After high school, Paul enrolled at the University of Toronto, studying accounting. Outwardly, he was charming, popular with women, always seen on dates. But behind closed doors, his relationships were violent, scripted, and sadistic. Women who dated him endured knife-point sodomy, strangulation, and brutal control, all part of Paul's sick demands. When each relationship ended, he simply moved on to his next victim. After graduation, Paul landed a job at Price Waterhouse, blending into the corporate world. But his true nature was festering, waiting to explode in ways no one could imagine. The Scarborough rapist emerges as a junior accountant. Paul Bernardo appeared to be just another white-collar worker, but behind the facade, the monster within was awakening, no longer content with just watching from the shadows. He began hunting. On May 4, 1987, a young woman stepped off a bus near her parents' house, unaware she was being stalked. In an instant, Paul dragged her into the darkness, brutally raping her. 2 more attacks followed in the next week alone. Each assault followed the same horrific pattern: savage beatings, vicious verbal abuse, threats to silence his victims. Police quickly realized a serial predator was at work. The media would soon dub the Scarborough rapist. His victims, all young women, aged 15. 2 to 1, enter Carla Hamalkin, October 1987. Paul's dark path took a twisted turn when he met 17-year-old Carla Hamelka at a hotel bar, born on May 4, 1970. Carla was the daughter of Czech immigrants, a bright, popular girl with straight A's. But beneath the surface, she was deeply troubled. Faked suicide attempts, self-harmed for attention, rebelled against authority that night. The two became instantly obsessed with each other, a match made in hell. Control over Carla was immediate. He dictated what she wore, what she ate, even called her ugly and unworthy. But instead of running, Carla embraced his cruelty. When Paul discovered she wasn't a virgin, he flew into a rage even, though he wasn't either. His obsession demanded total ownership. Then came the ultimate test. One day, Paul asked Carla, "What would you do if I was the Scarborough rapist?" Her response, "I think that's cool." With that, a new nightmare began. Partners in crime. Paul no longer worked alone. Now, Carla joined him, watching, sometimes even participating, as he dragged women into the darkness. By 1988, he had assaulted or attempted to assault over 13 women, often near bus stops. With Carla by his side, police scrambled for leads, circulating a composite sketch of the suspect. Paul was questioned twice. He walked free. The descent into unimaginable evil. By 1990, Paul had lost his job and turned to cigarette smuggling. But his darkest obsession was yet to come. Carla's 15-year-old sister, Tammy. He would sneak into her room at night, watching her sleep. Then, in a sickening twist, Carla agreed to help him rape Tammy, calling it his Christmas present. July 24, 1990. Carla spiked Tammy's food with Valium stolen from her vet clinic, but the dose wasn't strong enough. Tammy woke up just in time. December 23, 1990. They tried again. This time, they drugged Tammy into unconsciousness, held a rag over her face, and both raped her as she lay helpless. Then disaster. Tammy began vomiting, choking, struggling to breathe. In a panic, they tried to revive her, but it was too late. A mockery of justice, the couple staged the scene, calling 911 and claiming Tammy had overdosed on alcohol. Authorities ruled it an accident, ignoring the chemical burns on her face. At the funeral, Paul stroked Tammy's hair, while he and Carla placed a photo of themselves beside her body, a final, grotesque insult. The killer's new playground, now living together in Port Dalhousie. They reenacted Tammy's rape and murder as part of their sick fantasies. But their hunger wasn't satisfied. June 7, 1991, Carla lured a teen co-worker, Jane Doe, to their home, drugged her, and gifted her to Paul as a wedding present. They filmed the assault. June 15, 1991, Paul encountered 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey, locked out of her house after a funeral, pretending to befriend her. He offered her a cigarette, then blindfolded her. Leslie would never see home again. Leslie Mahaffey's nightmare. When 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey missed her curfew and found herself locked out of her home. She had no idea the friendly stranger offering her a cigarette was Paul Bernardo, a man who had already raped over a dozen women and murdered Carla's sister, Tammy. Within minutes, Leslie was blindfolded, bound, and thrown into the back of Paul's car. At their home, Carla eagerly joined in as they dragged Leslie inside. What followed was hours of torture recorded on video, with Bob Marley and David Bowie playing in the background. Leslie, still blindfolded, screamed and begged for her life, but her pleas only amused them. By morning, Paul and Carla decided Leslie had to die. She could identify them. They drugged her with a lethal dose of sedatives. Then Paul strangled her, the gruesome cover-up to hide their crime. They dismembered Leslie's body with an electric saw, encased her remains in cement, dumped the blocks in Lake Gibson. Just 2 weeks later, on June 29, 1991, the same day Paul and Carla got married, Leslie's remains were discovered by a father and son fishing near the shore. Kristen French's 3-day ordeal, months later. On April 16, 1992, 15-year-old Kristen French was abducted after school. For 3 days, she was held captive, raped, and tortured while Paul taunted her with false promises of freedom. But Kristen fought back when she called Paul a bastard. Something inside him snapped. Enraged, he beat her with a rubber mallet, then strangled her for 7 agonizing minutes, refusing to stop until she was dead. Like Leslie, Kristen's body was cleaned, stripped of identifying features, and dumped in a Burlington ditch. The investigation collapses on Paul when police found both girls' bodies close together. They realized the murders were connected. Witness descriptions of Kristen's abductor matched the Scarborough rapist sketch perfectly. Tips flooded in. Friends, co-workers, even Carla's family pointed to Paul. But despite his DNA being collected years earlier in the rape cases, it had never been tested. Carla's betrayal in January 1993. Carla showed up at a hospital, badly beaten, black eyes, broken wrist, barely able to walk. Paul was arrested for assault, but released on bail, fearing for her life. Carla fled to her family and confessed everything: the rapes, the murders, even her own role in Tammy's death. She struck a deal with prosecutors: immunity in exchange for testimony. But when police raided their home and found the tapes, the truth was undeniable. Carla wasn't a victim, she was a willing participant. The trial that shocked the nation. At Carla's trial in June 1993, she played the battered wife, sobbing, "He held knives to my throat. I was afraid for my life." The public bought it. She was sentenced to just 12 years, eligible for parole in 3. But when Paul's trial began in 1995, the videotapes were played in court. The footage showed Carla laughing during rapes, encouraging Paul's violence, actively participating in the murders. The nation was horrified. Verdict and aftermath. On September 1, 1995, Paul Bernardo was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, multiple aggravated sexual assaults, kidnapping. He was sentenced to life in prison with no parole, for 25 years later deemed a dangerous offender, ensuring he'll never be freed. Carla, however, walked free in 2005, after serving just 12 years, remarrying, having children, and living under a new identity. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Paul Bernardo was convicted on over 30 charges related to the kidnappings, rapes, and murders he committed. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Carla Homolka, on the other hand, was released in 2005. She has since remarried Terry Bourdet, the brother of her former lawyer, and now lives in Quebec under the name Leanne Teal. Together, she and Terry have 3 children. Her release has remained controversial, with a Facebook page called "Watching Carla Homolka," tracking her movements around the city. In one of her rare interviews since leaving prison, she reflected on her younger self, saying, "At the time, I was 17 years old. I lacked knowledge. I feared being abandoned. I was desperate for a relationship. I lacked confidence. There were numerous aspects of myself that I was unaware of at the time, but I'm now aware of them." As of the making of this video in 2022, Paul Bernardo remains incarcerated at Millhaven Penitentiary in Eastern Ontario. By February 2018, Bernardo had met the eligibility requirements for parole. He has applied twice since then. Both requests were denied. His most recent attempt came in June 2021. The hearing lasted just 1 hour before the presiding judge rejected his plea. In that hearing, Paul argued that he had been without meaningful human contact for more than 10,000 days, claiming it had left him feeling stressed and anxious. He insisted that he was a changed man, even characterizing his punishment as cruel and inhumane. "I am no longer preoccupied with fantasies," Bernardo told the parole board. "Without a doubt, I'm low risk. I have fought all deviant sexual behavior for 2 years." The parole board deliberated for only 30 minutes before denying his request. Today, Paul spends most of his time confined to his cell, with just 1 hour of solitary yard time. Reports indicate he has no meaningful human interaction with other inmates or guards. His only regular contact with the outside world comes from letters sent by disillusioned admirers. In his own words, "I cry all the time." We find it both ironic and perfectly fitting that Paul now feels he is being treated inhumanly, and can't help but wish that Carla had shared in more of that inhumanity. Case 2. The murder of Remy Takmith. This next case is one of the most perplexing to come out of the Philippines in recent years. It's filled with twists, turns, and divided public opinion. While it's now considered legally resolved, it still raises lingering questions. It was a typical Monday morning in Sitio Mohan, Barangay Tisa, in Cebu City. The day began with the usual rush of morning commuters, but around 7 a.m., something unusual caught the attention of several passers-by. A large discarded carton box, lying conspicuously by the roadside. A security guard from a nearby private subdivision first noticed it, but dismissed it, assuming it had fallen from a delivery van. Others walking by detected a foul odor, and saw flies swarming around the box. Yet no one intervened. It wasn't until 1 p.m. that a street sweeper decided to move the box off the road. It was too heavy to lift alone, so he sought help from local barangay tanits, village peacekeepers. As they tried to move it, the box flap suddenly opened. To their horror, an arm fell out. Shaken, the street sweeper and the tanids rushed to the barangay hall to report what they had found. Captain Ringo Pacana immediately relayed the discovery to the Labangan police station. Officers quickly arrived, confirming everyone's worst fear. The box contained a dead body. By 2 p.m., investigators were examining the scene. The victim's arms and legs had been bound with aluminum cables. She was wrapped in a white blanket, and her face appeared to have been smashed and burned, possibly with heated cables. Bruises covered various parts of her body, though some could have been post-mortem changes. The only clues to her identity were her dyed blonde hair, a black sweater, black shorts, and manicured nails. Details suggesting she may not have been a local resident of Tisa, but rather a visitor. Who was this woman, and how had she ended up discarded like trash? The following day, July 18th, 2023, investigators made a breakthrough. They matched the victim's description to a missing persons report filed recently. The body was believed to be that of Remy Takmo from Panabo City in Davao del Norte. Remy had been staying in Mandaue City after flying into Cebu on June 11th, seeking work. Some sources place her arrival at June 14th, but either way, she had been in Cebu for over a month. When police contacted her family and friends, they confirmed their worst fears. The clothes found on the victim matched those Remy was last seen wearing, and her favorite black shorts and a distinctive necklace were unmistakable. Her phone and wallet were missing. Investigators began retracing her final movements, collecting CCTV footage from the places she had been. They suspected the white blanket she was wrapped in might have come from a local inn or lodging house. Who was Remy? Remy was described by family as kind, obedient, and family-oriented. Despite growing up in a broken home, she was known for her warm personality and eagerness to help others. Her father, Romeo Takmo, spoke of her gentle demeanor and her dedication to her studies, which she had hoped would help support her family. She lived with her eldest sister, Roki, in Panabo City while attending college. Initially, she studied criminology with dreams of becoming a police officer, but later considered tourism. Ultimately, she chose to leave school, to work, and help with family expenses. Without informing her family, Remy traveled to Cebu for a job opportunity with her friend, Jewel Smith. She first stayed at a staff house connected to her new workplace before moving into a boarding house in Barangay Magike, Mandaue City. She found work in a local bar and restaurant, but her family had no idea she was in Cebu until she called to ask for help booking a ticket home for July 21st to attend a friend's christening. On July 16th, multiple witnesses, including Jewel, and a vendor near her boarding house reported seeing her for the last time. Weeks later, crucial CCTV footage emerged. It showed Remy leaving her boarding house on a yellow motorcycle driven by a man in an orange shirt. Police believe she may have been transferred to another vehicle shortly after. The motorcycle traveled toward Cebu City, passing along Panagdate Road in Barangay Mabolo, before heading to Escario Street. The driver's identity remains a mystery, as his face was hidden by a helmet. The footage has since been sent to the Regional Anti-Cybercrime Unit for enhancement. In the early stages of the investigation, police suspected that Remy's facial burns might have been caused by boiling water or acid. The autopsy revealed hematomas on Remy's wrists and legs, as well as a stab wound on her side. The official cause of death was determined to be strangulation. As for her face, it had not been burned. The damage was due to the natural effects of decomposition. A significant development came on July 27, 2023, 10 days after Remy was last seen alive. Her missing smartphone resurfaced when a man walked into the Labangan police station, claiming he had purchased it from another individual near Carbon Public Market. While inspecting the phone, he found photos of Remy and recognized her from news reports about the woman found inside a discarded box in Barangay Tiso. He immediately handed the device over to police. CCTV footage taken near Carbon Market captured the man who had sold the phone. He was wearing an orange t-shirt, a detail that connected him to the early investigation. Police now considered him a person of interest, believing he might hold vital information about the murder. Authorities stated that the man had initially tried to unlock Remy's phone, but, after failing, sold it for 1,700 pesos. The public was urged to help identify and locate him. Investigators were also still searching for the unidentified motorcycle driver who had picked up Remy on July 16th, the last day she was seen alive. Then, on July 29th, by sheer coincidence, officers from the Guadalupe police station arrested 22-year-old construction worker Simeon Gabiatero Jr. for illegal possession of a firearm. Shortly after his arrest, police recognized him as the man in the orange t-shirt from the CCTV footage, the same man who had sold Remy's phone. Gabiatero maintained his innocence regarding the murder. In an interview with CDN Digital, he insisted he did not know the victim, but admitted to selling her phone. He claimed he was acting on instructions from his neighbor, a man named Gabison, who had given him the phone on July 16th, with orders to unlock or sell it. Gabiatero said he managed to sell it for 1,700 pesos, handing most of the money to Gabison, who kept 500 pesos for him as payment. According to Gabiatero, he had no idea the phone belonged to a murder victim. He alleged that Gabison had told him to keep the phone's ownership a secret. He also confessed to seeing Gabison arguing with a young woman, allegedly Remy, and attempting to strangle her near an elementary school in Barangay Guadalupe the day before the victim's body was discovered. Police records showed Gabiatero already had a criminal history. Just a month earlier, in June, he had allegedly taken part in a broad daylight robbery in Toledo City, where he and another suspect stole cash and valuables worth over 150,000 pesos from a businesswoman's home. On July 30th, police tracked down Gabison, who had been arrested on unrelated drug charges. When questioned, he strongly denied Gabiatero's claims, stating he had never met either the suspect or the victim. As part of the ongoing investigation, both men underwent DNA testing on August 4th. This forensic step was crucial to determine whether either suspect could be linked to the crime scene, despite having two men in custody. Authorities continued to appeal to the public for leads. Meanwhile, some community members expressed suspicion over how quickly the suspects had been identified, suggesting there could be more complexity to the case than initially believed. On August 5th, while the DNA results were still pending, new potential witnesses began coming forward, sparking a wave of social media speculation. One such individual was a taxi driver who claimed that on July 17th, the day Remy's body was discovered, He had picked up a petite tattooed woman carrying a large empty box, accompanied by a foreign-looking man. The pair allegedly boarded his taxi on B. Rodriguez Street and asked to be taken to a condominium in Barangay Tisa. The woman's description seemed to match Remy's close friend, Jewel Smith. On August 7th, a visibly distressed Smith voluntarily went to the city police station to clear her name. She denied the allegations outright, stating she had not left her boarding house in Barangay Maguique, Mando City, since finishing her shift at work on July 16th. Last July 17th, I was just at home. My neighbors can testify to that. I don't like going out, Smith told reporters. She also denied being anywhere near B. Rodriguez Street or Barangay Tisa that day. Smith explained that the last time she saw Remy was on July 16th and that she herself had filed the missing persons report after Remy failed to return the next day. Since the taxi driver's interview, Smith and her family had faced a storm of online harassment. Her photos were shared without permission, and she became the target of baseless accusations. Police urged the public to provide information directly to investigators rather than fueling rumors on social media. Smith has since considered legal action against the taxi driver for defamation. Ultimately, police ruled her out as a suspect and acknowledged her cooperation in the case. Then, on August 10th, the investigation took a decisive turn. Police Colonel Iranio Dalagdog of the Cebu City Police Office announced that Simeon Gabuchero Jr. had confessed to the murder. The breakthrough came after DNA analysis revealed that skin cells found under Remy's fingernails matched Gabuchero's DNA. In his confession, Gabuchero claimed that Remy, whom he had met through Facebook, was his girlfriend. They had been in an online relationship since December 5th of the previous year, but July 16th, 2023, was the first time they met in person. She arrived at his boarding house in Barangay Guadalupe at around 6 a.m. Gabuchero alleged that he became enraged when he discovered Remy had multiple Facebook accounts and was messaging other men, despite the money he had been sending her from his modest earnings as a construction worker. Just 400 pesos a day. His jealousy intensified when he allegedly found drug paraphernalia in her bag, believing his financial support was being misused. When he confronted her, Gabuchero claimed, she laughed at his outburst. In a fit of rage, he strangled her. Remy did not scream, but tried to pull his hands away in resistance. A friend of Remy's, Jewel Smith, later mentioned that Remy had been drinking before the incident, which could explain her reduced ability to fight back. Gabuchero also expressed anger that Remy had not told him she was in Cebu prior to visiting him. After realizing she was dead, he wrapped her body in a blanket, tied her with garter strips and shoelaces, and placed her inside a cardboard box. With the help of another person, he transported the box on his motorcycle and dumped it in an overgrown area in Barangay Tisa. He denied burning her face, a claim supported by the medical findings that the damage was due to decomposition. A legal officer explained that some of the injuries observed could have resulted from decomposition, as Rhea May had been dead for over 24 hours. Distraught and filled with regret, Simeon Gabuchero told police he was ready to face the consequences. His confession, detailed in an extrajudicial statement, signed on August 10th, also revealed an attempt to frame his neighbor, Ruto Gabus, due to a past dispute. Police confirmed that no evidence linked Gabus to Rhea May's death, and Gabuchero's admission cleared the man of any involvement. Likewise, there was no evidence implicating Jewel Smith. Discrepancies in the taxi driver's account, such as the timing and description of the box, further exonerated her. In his confession, Gabuchero admitted to killing Rhea inside his boarding house at approximately 6 a.m. CCTV footage later captured him around 10 p.m. that same day, attempting to dispose of her body. The footage showed him transporting a box containing her remains on a motorcycle. Gabuchero has refused to identify the backrider who was with him during the disposal. Despite his confession and the mounting evidence, Ria's family were both shocked and dissatisfied with the outcome. They firmly believed she had not been in a relationship and felt the confession unfairly tarnished her reputation. Adding to their grief, they publicly called for a parallel investigation, questioning the credibility of Gabbiatero's claims. They argued that police had not properly verified whether Gabbiatero and Ria had known each other since December 2022, or whether he had actually sent her money via. The family's mistrust of the investigation was voiced during an August 11th press conference. In response, Police Major Angelito Valsar, chief of the Labangan police station, urged the family to visit the station to personally review the evidence. He expressed respect for their concerns and stressed the importance of transparency in the investigation. A significant development followed that same day when Marjan Carrell, a motorcycle taxi driver from Lapu-Lapu City, voluntarily came forward to clear his name. Carrell explained that he realized only recently after seeing his motorcycle in social media posts that his passenger that night had been Ria May. He stressed that he had no intention of hiding and had simply transported her from Bangkok to Gabbiatero's residence for a fare of 300 pesos during the early dawn hours of July 16th. He recalled even asking strangers on the street for directions. "I only found out yesterday, Thursday, August 10th, that my passenger had passed away," Carrell told police. "I knew there was a murder, but I didn't know she was the passenger." His account confirmed that Ria had indeed gone to Gabbiatero's home before her death. Gabbiatero's own mother corroborated this. She said she had left her apartment before Ria's arrival, as Gabbiatero had told the family to vacate for the day because he would be entertaining a female guest. When she returned around 6 a.m. to cook breakfast, she knocked on the door and found Gabbiatero alone, sweating. Later that evening, at about 7 p.m., she noticed a large carton box in the house. When she asked about its contents, Gabbiatero claimed it was filled with clothes. At 10 p.m., he asked his younger brother to help him move the box still, insisting it held clothes. On August 14th, police presented the recovered evidence to Ria's relatives, conclusively tying Gabby to the killing. Items included a black jacket he wore, the red helmet and white jacket worn by his younger brother during the disposal, Gabbiatero's bag, and the shirt he had on when he sold Ria's cell phone. In a sworn statement, the younger brother recounted the trip they took to Cebu City, transporting the box that Simeon claimed contained clothes. He later learned the truth that it held Ria's body, which was found the next morning on a roadside in Mohan. The evidence, CCTV footage, witness testimony, and forensic findings overwhelmingly pointed to Simeon Gabbiatero. Police Major Vals confirmed that the footage matched the younger brother's account. SIU City Police Director Colonel Iranyo Dalit Dog announced that the murder case against Gabbiatero would proceed as soon as the necessary documents were completed. Ria's father, Romeo Taco, expressed gratitude to police for their swift action. Her sisters, Ruz Taco, Paul Bakken, and Grace Taco, who had initially met the confession with disbelief, were ultimately convinced of Gabbiatero's guilt after reviewing the evidence and hearing investigators' explanations. While the loss was unbearable, they found some measure of closure. Additional damning evidence emerged when a neighbor stated in an affidavit that he had seen Gabbiatero on July 17th with multiple nail scratches on his arm. This matched the forensic unit's findings. Ria, in a desperate fight for her life, had scratched her attacker, leaving DNA under her fingernails. Testing confirmed it matched Gabbiatero on September 1st, 2023. From his detention cell at Labangan police station, Gabbiatero reiterated his confession to reporters. "I killed Ria Ma Taco. I was not forced to admit it." Meanwhile, a woman using the alias Bianca Lee appeared on social media and in a radio show on August 31st, accusing Ria's friend, Joel Smith, of being involved. Gabbiatero denied ever meeting Smith, calling the allegations baseless. Major Valsar again urged the public to bring any genuine evidence to the police, instead of fueling speculation online. Radio station manager Ruffled Banek even offered a Philippine peso 100,000 reward for any substantial proof Bianca Lee claimed to have, but none surfaced. Some still suspected Gabutero's confession was coerced to shield influential figures. Major Valls rejected this, stressing that representatives from the Commission on Human Rights had been present throughout the confession process to ensure no force or intimidation was used. On August 18, 2023, murder charges were officially filed against Simeon Gabutero and his 15-year-old brother. While the younger sibling claimed he did not know the box contained a body, his role in helping dispose of it resulted in charges. Major Valsar expressed full confidence in the strength of the case, stating that even if Gabutero attempted to retract his confession, the overwhelming evidence would stand. Amid the speculation and public debate, one fact remained clear. This case was about a young woman with dreams, a family to support, and a future ahead of her. Riama Taco's murder became a testament to the persistence of investigators who, despite criticism, worked to uncover the truth. Case 3. A visibly nervous 73-year-old man walked into a hospital, accompanied by a young woman whom medical staff initially assumed was his daughter. But as doctors examined her, they were horrified. She looked far older than her years, her skin was pale and lifeless, and the few teeth she had left were rotten and loose. The truth was worse than their initial assumption. She was not his daughter at all, but his 19-year-old granddaughter. The shock the staff and police felt in that moment was nothing compared to what they would discover about the circumstances leading to her condition. In the victim's own words, "No one is going to believe me after 24 years of over a 4-year period." One of Joseph Fritzl's tenants noticed something strange. His dog would sometimes jolt awake in the middle of the night, growling and sniffing at seemingly nothing. Each time, the tenant would search the house for the source of the animal's distress, but he never found anything unusual. He certainly never discovered the concealed cellar door. Neither this man, his wife, nor any of the many tenants who passed through the home over the years grew suspicious enough to report Joseph's odd behavior, even as he spent more time in the basement, began living separately from his wife, and often claimed to be away on business trips while actually sleeping below ground. Some tenants even saw him carry bags of groceries, building materials, appliances, and furniture down into the basement, but still, no one acted. Despite the horrific circumstances surrounding the births of her children, Elizabeth cared deeply for the 3 who lived with her in captivity. Investigators and reporters later expressed astonishment at how well she had managed to raise them. She asked Joseph to bring books so she could teach them to read and write, and she made sure they learned about the outside world through the television and radio he allowed in the basement. In 1994, after Elizabeth gave birth to a 4th child, Joseph expanded the cramped, 380-square-foot prison to 590 square feet, about 50% larger. The new space consisted of a narrow corridor, a storage area, 3 small open cells connected by tight passageways, 2 sleeping areas with 2 beds each, basic cooking facilities, and a rudimentary bathroom. The ceilings were painfully low, just 5'6" in some spots, and never more than 6 feet, forcing Stefan, who eventually grew to 5'8", to stoop nearly all the time to achieve the expansion. Joseph made his underground family dig out the walls with their bare hands. He warned them that touching the cellar door would electrocute them, and that any escape attempt would result in them being gassed. Police later confirmed there was no gas supply to the basement. It had been a calculated lie to terrify them. Joseph punished even the smallest disobedience with cruelty. In addition to the constant physical and sexual abuse, he would cut off the electricity, plunging the cellar into total darkness, or withhold food and water, sometimes for days at a time. On April 19, 2008, the nightmare was about to end. 19-year-old Kirsten, one of Elizabeth's 3 children still living underground, suddenly fell unconscious, the first time this had happened. Elizabeth pleaded with Joseph to get medical help, and he agreed. He let her come upstairs to help carry Kirsten to the car, her first glimpse of the outside world in 24 years. Once Kirsten was inside, Joseph locked Elizabeth and the other children back in the cellar and drove away. At the hospital, doctors were immediately alarmed. Kirsten's skin was so pale it was almost transparent. Her veins were clearly visible. They asked Joseph for her name to check her medical records, but nothing came up. She simply didn't exist. Examination revealed she was in critical condition with kidney failure and other health problems caused by severe vitamin D deficiency. Joseph told the staff Kirsten was his granddaughter, but her apparent age, younger than he claimed, only increased their concern. When he refused to answer important questions or gave evasive responses, suspicion grew. On April 21st, police issued a public appeal for Elizabeth to come forward to provide her daughter's medical history, reopening her missing person case. Joseph insisted Elizabeth had joined a cult and even produced another letter he had forced her to write, postmarked in a nearby town. A cult expert consulted by police immediately doubted both the letter and the cult's existence. Elizabeth begged Joseph to let her go to the hospital. A week later, on April 26th, he relented, but only if she stuck to the fabricated story. He also allowed the two remaining children upstairs while they went. The moment they arrived, police detained Joseph and Elizabeth separately for questioning. At first, Elizabeth was timid, speaking quietly, avoiding eye contact. Doctors initially suspected she might be an abusive mother whose neglect had caused Kirsten's condition, until they noticed Elizabeth shared the same ghostly pallor, with white hair and unnaturally pale skin. Still terrified, Elizabeth refused to cooperate until police granted her one request. She would never have to see her father again. Once they agreed, she told them everything. Over the next several hours, she recounted her 24 years in captivity, the sexual abuse that began before her imprisonment, the births of her children, the ones taken from her, and the humiliations Joseph forced on her, including making her reenact pornographic scenes with him in front of their children. That same night, police forced Joseph to give them the key code to the electric lock. They searched the house and basement, finding the hidden dungeon exactly as Elizabeth had described. 73-year-old Joseph Fritzl was arrested and taken into custody. 3 days later, on April 29th, DNA tests confirmed Elizabeth's account. All 6 surviving children were biologically his. Police also began tracking down and interviewing every person who had ever rented a room in the house. During the investigation, police uncovered hundreds of letters Joseph had forced Elizabeth to write over the years. One in particular seemed to suggest that he was planning to release her from the basement the following year. In it, she wrote that she wanted to come home, but that it wasn't possible just yet. Investigators soon learned it, and Joseph later confirmed that his plan was to eventually free Elizabeth. But to tell the outside world, he had heroically rescued her from the cult he claimed she had run away to. He admitted he was growing too old to care for his secret family, and was formulating what he thought was a believable exit strategy. Once in police custody, Joseph confessed to everything. He claimed that, while he forced Elizabeth to stay in the basement, their relationship was consensual, portraying himself as a man living a second life underground with a loving family. He insisted the media had painted him as a monster, but said he and Elizabeth enjoyed spending time together. Despite these delusional statements, he admitted he always knew what he was doing was wrong. He simply didn't care. Joseph said he locked Elizabeth away because she no longer followed his rules as a teenager, and he believed it was his duty to protect her from the outside world, even by force. But his actions told a much darker truth. Decades without sunlight, fresh air, medical attention, or dental care had taken a devastating toll on her health. He even admitted that Elizabeth's teeth had rotted so severely they fell out one by one, leaving her in constant agony. By the time she reached the hospital on the day of her rescue, Every tooth in her mouth was gone. He also admitted that forcing Elizabeth to bear so many children was part of his obsession with control. He wanted to own her completely, and even if she escaped, the number of children would make her undesirable to any future partner, forcing her, he believed, to return to him. In fact, Joseph had planned Elizabeth's imprisonment years earlier. During a prior prison sentence for rape, he told a fellow inmate he intended to lock his daughter away, to give himself an outlet for his evil side. He chillingly confessed, "I was born to rape. I could have behaved much worse than locking up my daughter." Psychological analysts later concluded that his depravity was likely rooted in his own abusive upbringing. While Joseph once spoke fondly of his mother, he later revealed the truth. She beat him until he lay bleeding, called him Satan, and made him live in fear. In a disturbing twist, after marrying Rosemary, Joseph moved his mother into their home but soon began abusing her in turn. Eventually, he locked her in the attic, telling everyone she had died, when in reality, she may have remained a prisoner for up to 20 years before dying in captivity, to protect Elizabeth from having to face him again. Her testimony for prosecutors in July 2008 was videotaped. That month, Joseph went on trial for negligent homicide in the death of infant Michael, who died shortly after birth, as well as rape, incest, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and enslavement. On the first day, he pled guilty to all charges, except negligent homicide and the assault charge related to his threats to gas his captives. His attorney urged jurors not to be swayed by emotion, pointing out that Joseph had once brought a Christmas tree down to the cellar. The prosecution pressed for life imprisonment in a psychiatric facility, demonstrating the low ceilings, damp, moldy walls, an overwhelming stench of the dungeon. Jurors viewed 11 hours of Elizabeth's testimony in 2-hour segments, as the content was too harrowing to endure for longer at a time. Her brother testified about Joseph's abuse, but Rosemary and the Cellar children refused to appear in court. Elizabeth attended the trial's second day, having been disguised during the first, in preparation for a book she planned to write. When Joseph spotted her, he went pale and broke down. The next day, he abruptly changed his plea to guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 15 years, which he accepted without appeal. After the trial, Elizabeth and her 6 children received new identities and a new home. All required ongoing therapy. The upstairs children struggled with the trauma of Joseph's abuse and the revelation that he had lied about their mother abandoning them, while the downstairs children bore the deep psychological and physical scars of deprivation and abuse. All 6 also faced potential genetic issues from their incestuous parentage. Elizabeth eventually forgave her mother, whom she once blamed for believing Joseph's lies, and now allows her 3 upstairs children to visit their grandmother regularly. In 2013, the cellar of the Fritzl home was filled with concrete, and the property was sold 3 years later, converted into apartments. Joseph was placed in a secure psychiatric unit at Krems prison. In 2017, he changed his name to Joseph Meerhoff, reportedly after prison fights in which several of his teeth were knocked out. A British journalist who interviewed him reported he showed no remorse, quoting Joseph as saying, "Just look into the cellars of other people. You might find other families and girls down there." By 2019, his health had declined, and he reportedly suffered from dementia, withdrawing from other inmates who likewise wanted nothing to do with him. In 2021, a court briefly considered transferring him to a standard prison, but that decision was overturned. Had the transfer gone ahead, Joseph would have been eligible for parole in 2023. Instead, as of 2023, he remains in a secure psychiatric facility, still ineligible for release. Elizabeth's courage, and that of her children, stands in stark contrast to the depravity they endured, an extraordinary testament to human resilience in the face of unimaginable cruelty. It takes unimaginable courage to stand up to and speak out against a force that has ruled over every aspect of your life for nearly a quarter of a century. Elizabeth's strength is an inspiration. Case for it was Sunday, September 17, 2023, when police were dispatched to a family home in Romeoville, Illinois, for a welfare check. The call came in at 8:43 p.m. 32-year-old Zorita Bartholomew hadn't answered her mother's phone calls all day, something entirely out of character. Her mother often checked in about the kids, and Zorita was quick to respond. But this day was different. The concern deepened when it was discovered that her husband, 38-year-old Alberto Roldan, hadn't shown up for his 6 a.m. shift that morning. Both were known as responsible and reliable. For them to vanish without a word was alarming. The Bartholomews had recently moved into the home, a beautiful property with a backyard in the quiet, suburban community of Romeoville, just southwest of Chicago. The household consisted of 4, Zorita Alberto, their 2 young boys, 10-year-old Adriel and 7-year-old Diego, and 3 dogs. But as officers approached, the scene felt wrong. With 3 dogs, you'd expect barking, movement, or noise. Instead, there was nothing, just silence. Zorita's mother had requested the welfare check. Her brother was already on his way, desperate to see if everything was all right. In hindsight, it was a grim mercy that officers arrived first. When they reached the home, the lights were off, no one answered the door, and the stillness inside was unsettling. Flashlights swept through windows as officers tried to see inside. Romeoville, 327. Can we get another unit to Camden, please? Everything's 10 to 4. No, we're going to go around that side. There's a gate over there. They split up, checking the garage and backyard. One officer called out that the back door was open. Then came the chilling discovery. I got 2 dead dogs, both shot. The decision was made to enter, cautiously. They didn't know if the killer, or killers, were still inside. A riot shield and rifle were brought in for cover. Once inside, the grim truth became clear. All 3 dogs had been shot in the head. Their claw marks gouged the front door. Desperate attempts to escape whatever horror was unfolding. In the hallway, Alberto was found first. He was lying face down in a pool of blood, multiple gunshot wounds in his back, a sign he had been trying to flee. In the bedroom, the scene was even more devastating. The door had been kicked in. Evidence of a struggle suggested Zorita had fought desperately to protect her children. She was found with her hands covering her face, a final, instinctive act of terror, shot multiple times. The boys, Adriel and Diego, were murdered in their beds. Both were shot while they slept, spared no chance to escape or defend themselves. Shell casings littered the house. The killings had been quick, violent, and targeted. Even the pets had been executed. Spray painted on a wall was a single, haunting letter, F. The brutality suggested a message, the kind seen in organized crime hits. But here, in a quiet Midwestern suburb, it felt surreal. When Zorita's brother arrived, he was met with a sea of flashing lights and police tape. He now faced the unthinkable task of telling their mother that her daughter, son-in-law, and grandsons were gone. Initial speculation considered a murder-suicide, but that theory crumbled quickly. Alberto's wounds told a different story. He'd been shot from behind while trying to escape. Investigators estimated the murders occurred sometime between 9 p.m. Saturday and 5 a.m. Sunday. There was no sign of forced entry, but the attack was clearly targeted. Family and friends were devastated. Both Zorita and Alberto had good jobs, no financial trouble, no known gang ties, and no firearms in the home. Neighbors were equally stunned. No one had heard gunshots. Despite the houses being close together, the Romeoville police enlisted the help of the FBI, and ATF. The calculated, execution-style murders, including the killing of the family dogs, bore a chilling resemblance to cartel assassinations at Robert C. Hill Elementary. Grief counselors were brought in to help classmates cope with the loss of Adriel and Diego. Zorita's sister took to social media, pleading for answers. I want to know what happened to my nephews, my sister, her husband, and why. As detectives began interviews, a detail emerged. Zorita had been having an affair with a colleague from work. Zorita had been unfaithful before, but after confessing to her husband, the two managed to work things out and move forward. This time, however, was different. She was reportedly infatuated with a coworker, 32-year-old Nathaniel Huey Jr. The two had been involved since May 2023, when they met while working at AAN Engineering, a machined parts manufacturer. Zorita confided to her sister that Nathaniel was her soulmate, the Romeo to her Juliet, on September 18, 2023. The day after the horrific discovery at the Romoville residence, police went to speak with Huey at his workplace. Her sister's belief in their deep connection appeared to be true. Officers found a post-it note at Huey's workstation, seemingly written in Zorita's handwriting. The affair was hardly a well-kept secret. In fact, Zorita's husband had known about some of her previous affairs, but had chosen to either ignore them or address them privately, believing that keeping the family together was more important than marital fidelity. To some, this might seem like a noble effort. To others, it might appear as simply tolerating the intolerable. During questioning, detectives told Nathaniel they were aware of the affair, but that wasn't their primary concern. They were trying to determine what happened at the house. The conversation touched on his vehicle, any prior contact with Zorita's husband, and whether Nathaniel had any role in the deaths. Detectives were upfront. His phone records, text messages, and Snapchat history would inevitably surface, and they didn't want to be blindsided by anything. Nathaniel was hesitant to hand over his phone, which could contain flirtatious exchanges with Zorita. The detectives pressed, explaining they had already reviewed her phone and needed his side of the conversations to verify there were no threats or suspicious exchanges. They offered him the choice: consent to a quick data extraction, or force them to obtain a search warrant, which would take longer. He suggested bringing the phone in later, but detectives noted that delaying could raise suspicions, especially if messages were deleted in the meantime. Further investigation revealed that Nathaniel had once owned a private security firm, Black Bear Security. He was also not single. He lived with his partner, 50-year-old Herlinda Palomo, who was 18 years older. Though not legally married, they had been together for 8 years, shared a home and a dog, and referred to each other as husband and wife. Both had children from previous relationships, and like Zorita, Nathaniel had a history of infidelity. Herlinda's family described him as a gun enthusiast. When police went to speak with her, she appeared surprised by their visit, but they explained that they had already seen certain messages and wanted to question her further, as they believed she might be in danger. Watch how it unfolded. If you're one of my regular viewers, you already know we're revisiting this one. Detectives were fairly certain that someone was very upset with the victim. One question lingered in their minds. Could these text messages be traced back to you, your name, your phone, anything connected to you? As Hermelinda stepped inside to grab her jacket, Nathaniel was seen leaving the house. Detectives seized the moment to separate the two, hoping to question each privately. Hermelinda, holding back tears, was comforted. It's all right. It's not all right. I'm saying it's okay if you cry. They asked if she wanted to head down the street to the police department. Is that near the park? She asked. It's right here, by Sunnydale Park, they replied. They began with the basics. How long had she known Huey? Since 2015, she said. Was she scared of him? She denied it, though she admitted she was scared right now. Earlier, when she called him, he claimed someone was following him. She heard him confront that person, "Why are you following me?" before someone accused him of sending certain messages, alleging that her husband's affair had been discovered. When had she learned of the affair? Just now. she insisted. It wasn't the first time. She recalled the last one, somewhere between 2015 and 2017, and another questionable moment in 2019 during a party. She admitted she didn't trust him, but she never confronted the other women. It's not the female's fault, she said. It's his fault. Detectives pressed on. Did he own guns? No, she said. He played airsoft, went to Milwaukee for tournaments, and occasionally shot at a ranch, but never owned a firearm. She was certain of it. The name Zoraida came up. She'd never met her, never even seen a picture, but she remembered hearing a long name one night and wondering if Huey was cheating. Huey, when asked, denied ever hearing that name. They assured her they wouldn't reveal what she'd said. But this wasn't just about infidelity. This was about a murder. If someone lost their life, the affair is the least of my worries, the detective told her. She described their weekend. Friday night, they drank heavily at home. He slept in the garage by choice, for comfort, while she slept in her room. Saturday, they were hungover, ran errands, ate at Jersey Mike's, then returned home. She fell asleep, later waking to find him with the kids. Her daughter had asked if she'd been yelling in the night. She hadn't. Perhaps it was Nathan, but her daughter said he'd been snoring. If Nathan left in the night, would she have known? Yes, she insisted. The old door made too much noise. She wouldn't cover for him, and she claimed her daughter had confirmed he was home. But detectives had more than just her word. Through skillful work, using Ring doorbell footage, cell tower data, and flock camera systems, police tracked a suspect vehicle traveling from Stroomwood, where Nathaniel and Hermelinda lived, to Romoville at the time of the family massacre. That vehicle belonged to Nathaniel Huey Jr., now with Nathan as their prime suspect. One chilling question remained. What motive could drive him to execute an entire family, including the woman he was allegedly having an affair with? A woman who called him her Romeo to her Juliet. The story took a darker turn the very next day, September 19th, 2023, when Hermelinda's family received a strange text from her around 4:30 p.m. Take care of my grandbabies. They instantly sensed something was very wrong. In July 2023, Alberto began receiving a new wave of poisonous messages. These weren't vague warnings. They were calculated and deeply personal. Under yet another false identity, Herlinda Palomo painted Nathaniel as a volatile and dangerous man, someone whose very presence put Alberto's family at risk. The messages were designed to chip away at Alberto's trust in Zoraida, to ignite suspicion, and to turn the couple against one another. What Alberto couldn't have known was that the sender, hiding behind layers of fake personas, was not some concerned outsider but the woman who would soon orchestrate his death. Despite receiving more and more messages, he refused to try to defuse the situation. Instead, he begged the messenger to just leave him alone. All I want to do is work, go home, and be with my kids. I'm not a complicated person. I don't need or deserve all this drama. But tensions soon boiled over into an altercation. Alberto allegedly slashed Nathaniel's tires. Later, in what seemed like a gesture of remorse, he apologized, paid for the damages, and urged Nathaniel to stay away from his wife. Zoraida, however, wasn't letting go. Her messages became increasingly threatening and explicit. As the weeks passed, she sent a chilling warning to Alberto. The mother of your children is putting them in danger, and she knows it. Huey has rifles and guns he carries with him. Less than 2 weeks before the murder, Alberto received another haunting text. This will be the last I say of this, Alberto. This stupid girl will be the reason you have no children. Despite these disturbing threats, there's no record of either Zoraida or Alberto reporting them to police. Zoraida even confided to a co-worker about the escalating harassment, admitting she feared for her family's safety, yet still no call was made to authorities. And to you, Zoraida, you lying, cold-hearted, jealous, manipulative killer. Remember this part? Of course you do. As for Huey, how foolish can you be? In the end, he cared more about himself than the lives of children and an entire family. So much for the macho man image he tried to project. He's dumber than a rock, and any shred of sympathy I might have had for him evaporated the moment I saw what he'd done. Ironically, the hero, Zarita claimed, would protect their relationship, was the one who ultimately took her life. This is Victor, and remember, there's a lot of evil in the world, which is why sometimes you must be the light in the darkness. Case 5. The murder of Emily Shores. Emily Shores was a young nursing assistant with a beautiful singing voice. She met Joseph Fatou, a tattoo artist, and like many whirlwind romances, things moved quickly. Within weeks of dating, the couple moved into an apartment in Essex Junction, Vermont. In August 2020, just 2 months later, in October 2020, they were married. Emily was 22 years old. Joseph was 41, nearly 2 decades her senior. While Emily worked as a licensed nursing assistant and dreamed of becoming a cosmetologist, Joseph was struggling financially. He had no permanent home and was couch surfing when they met. After their marriage, things seemed to improve. Drawn to the idea of freedom and saving money, they embraced van life, purchasing a Chevrolet Express shuttle bus they named Rosie. It was meant to be a symbol of a fresh start. Instead, Rosie would become the scene of a grim and horrifying end. 1 year into their marriage, Emily and Joseph planned a trip to Vermont to celebrate their anniversary. Emily was excited. She'd be meeting Joseph's sister Nicole for the first time. Her mother Adrienne recalled that Emily was in high spirits as they packed up their belongings and their dog, Remington, before leaving New Hampshire on Friday evening, October 15th, 2021. By Monday, October 18th, Joseph was back in New Hampshire alone. He didn't arrive in the camper van, but on his motorcycle. Pulling up to Emily's parents' house at 6 p.m., Adrienne sensed something was off. Joseph looked rattled, but she chalked it up to the cold ride and encouraged him to take a hot shower. Still, her mind was already racing. Where was Emily? Why had he returned without her, or the RV? Before stepping into the bathroom, Joseph handed Adrienne Emily's driver's license. Alarm bells rang instantly. Why was he carrying it? Why hadn't Emily come home with him? When Joseph emerged, Adrienne and her husband, David Buss, confronted him. Joseph claimed they'd argued in the camper van around 1 p.m. Saturday. According to him, Emily stormed out and began walking along Route 2, near the Bolton Valley Resort access road. He said he left briefly to visit a nearby store, and when he returned, she was gone, believing she needed time to cool off. He assumed she'd make her way home, maybe by Uber. 2 days later, there was still no word from Emily. Concerned, Adrienne and David called police at 7:15 p.m. that evening. Joseph was still in the house. At the time, after dinner, he left, but not on the motorcycle he'd arrived on. Instead, he drove off in his red Jeep Wrangler, which had been parked at the property. Adrien, and David pressed him about the RV's location. Joseph's answers were vague and inconsistent. His priority seemed to be retrieving the Jeep, not finding his missing wife. Adrienne also told police she feared Emily was a victim of domestic violence and that Joseph was hiding something. Emily's social media had gone completely silent since the trip began. The last message she sent was a Facebook post at 8:13 p.m. on October 15th, her final trace of life. Facebook data showed her last known location was logged at 10:14 p.m. that night. Police soon called Joseph. On the line, his voice was unsettlingly calm for a man whose wife had vanished. He claimed the RV was at an auto shop in Vergennes, a detail that would later prove false. That night, police found the camper van parked, not at an auto shop, but in a residential area of St. Albans, Vermont. At first, nothing seemed amiss, until they checked the bathroom. There, beneath the standing shower, they found 8 black garbage bags. Inside, dismembered body parts, a bloody red pillow, and 2 spent bullets. One bag contained the most horrifying discovery: Emily's head. Later, in court, the detective fought back tears as she testified about that moment. Q. What else was located in bag number 4, if anything? A. Emily's head. Q. And how were you able to confirm her identity? A. I recognized her from photos. Around the same time, police received a 911 call from Spencer Lemons, a man who claimed to know Joseph. Spencer said Joseph had confessed to killing Emily. The manhunt began immediately. By Tuesday afternoon, Vermont State Police issued a statewide alert naming Joseph Fatou and the couple's dog, Remington, as missing. He was last seen near property owned by a friend, close to where the RV had been found. Then fate intervened. A state police detective, stopping for lunch at a Maple Fields convenience store in St. Albans, spotted Joseph. An officer recalled, I just approached him, confirmed who he was, and asked if he'd be willing to come back with us. He was more than willing. Joseph was escorted to the St. Albans police barracks for questioning. At the St. Albans barracks, Joseph Fatou confessed, during interrogation, to murdering and dismembering his wife. Before questioning began, police photographed and booked him. The images showed no visible injuries, a detail that would later draw scrutiny. Investigators discovered that between 1 a.m. Saturday and Monday morning, Joseph sent Emily 16 text messages. They ranged from expressions of concern, "Where are you? When are you coming back?" to irritation and accusation. The last message read simply, "You're an A." During his recorded statement, Joseph claimed an argument in their bus had turned physical. He alleged Emily punched his arm and kicked him in the groin while they argued inside the vehicle. At one point, he said, "Something inside me said, enough is enough." He admitted retrieving his own Glock pistol and shooting her twice in the head while she was lying down, no longer fighting. After the shooting, he claimed he cleaned the scene, placed a bag over her head to contain the blood, and carried her body from the bed to the bathroom. He left the Glock on the bed and said multiple trash bags containing her remains were still inside the bus. Police later recovered 8 separate bags: bag 5, her right arm and left foot; bag 6, the remainder of her right leg; bag 7, her torso; bag 8, her left arm and right foot. The medical examiner, Dr. Shapiro, received all 8 bags. Radiographic imaging confirmed the remains belonged to one victim. The autopsy identified 2 fatal gunshot wounds to the head, both traveling left to right. Post-mortem injuries included 18 stab wounds, 1 to the chest, 8 to the abdomen, and 9 to the back. Toxicology showed only nicotine, marijuana, and caffeine, consistent with Emily's habits, and no alcohol. Cause of death: homicide by gunshot wounds. In addition to the remains, police found bloody knives, a saw believed to be used in the dismemberment, and Emily's engagement ring stained with what appeared to be blood in a cup holder. Joseph was arrested in 2023 and charged with first-degree murder in a separate civil case. Emily's family was awarded $1.5 million in a wrongful death lawsuit and regained custody of the couple's dog, Remington. His murder trial began in December 2024. The state called 15 witnesses. The defense called only one, Joseph himself. One of the state's key witnesses, Spencer Lemons of Sheldon, Vermont, testified he had known Joseph since 2016 or 2017. On the night of the murder, Joseph messaged Spencer via Facebook, asking for a ride to retrieve his bus from a residence known as the Langs. As they drove, Spencer noticed multiple police SUVs at the property. Joseph told him to drive past, which raised immediate suspicion. Pressed for answers, Joseph eventually admitted Emily was back in the van, and when asked if she was alive, replied no. When Spencer asked if he had hurt her, Joseph said yes. Fearing for his safety, Spencer pulled over, told Joseph to get out, and immediately called 911 on the stand. Joseph alleged self-defense, portraying Emily as an abusive partner. He described incidents where she allegedly struck him, including one in which she threw his phone at his face, then punched him repeatedly while yelling accusations about his contact with another woman. Joseph claimed he only restrained her until she ran out of steam, but that similar confrontations happened multiple times in their relationship. Joseph described a long history of conflict with Emily, beginning in the fall of 2020. He said that after she requested monogamy, he ended a physical relationship with a longtime friend named Victoria, maintaining only a platonic friendship. Emily, however, reacted with intense anger. According to Joseph, she not only yelled at him, but also physically assaulted him by hitting him. When asked if he retaliated, Joseph claimed he did not. He admitted to taking her by the arms to calm her down, after which they talked and reconciled. He told her it wasn't acceptable for her to hit him, sharing that he grew up in a violent household and didn't want that dynamic in their relationship, especially since they had discussed having children. Emily eventually apologized, and the violence stopped for about a month. Joseph recalled that later, in 2020, Emily confronted him while he was sending a client a GIF on Instagram. He said, she leaped onto the bed, struck him in the back of the head with her laptop, and called him degrading names. He developed a lump, but did not seek medical care. Afterward, Emily abruptly changed the subject, wanting to get food and watch Netflix. Another incident occurred the following month while Joseph was tattooing a female client. Emily had been monitoring the interaction via a Ring camera. When the client left, Emily allegedly entered the room, flipped the table over, and slapped him. She also punched him in the chest with a closed fist. Joseph's 6 feet tall and 200 pounds, said Emily, who was 5 feet 3 inches and about 130 pounds, still managed to inflict real pain. He also claimed he had seen her kick their dog, which made him fear for the safety of any future children they might have together. In one altercation, Joseph alleged she gave him a black eye, forcing him to restrain her by the arms. He described her as unusually strong, sweaty, and cursing, comparing her energy to someone on steroids. He said her aggression often followed arguments about his relationships with other people, as Emily wanted strict monogamy, while he identified as polyamorous. Joseph claimed that, on the night of Emily's death, October 15, 2021, she had been drinking and smoking, which escalated her aggression. He alleged she kicked their dog and came at him with a gun, prompting him to shoot her in self-defense. However, the autopsy revealed no alcohol in Emily's system, undermining his account. Prosecutors said forensic evidence told a very different story. According to the state, Joseph and Emily arrived at the Bear Run condos in Vermont at 7:20 p.m. to meet a friend. Later, an argument broke out over Joseph's unwillingness to commit to monogamy. Emily told him she was leaving him around midnight. Joseph turned off his phone and sat stewing for several minutes before deciding she could not leave. He retrieved his Glock 19 with a silencer from the closet and approached the bed where Emily was lying, scrolling on her phone. Using a throw pillow to muffle the sound, he fired 2 shots into the left side of her head. Investigators said both firearms found at the scene belonged to Joseph, and forensic evidence showed Emily was lying down when she was killed, contradicting his claim she was armed. Afterward, Joseph placed a Market Basket shopping bag over her head, likely to collect blood, and moved her body to the shower. He cleaned the crime scene, replaced the bed linens, and disposed of bloody items in garbage bags. At 1:35 a.m., he turned his phone back on and continued his day as if nothing had happened, texting his sister about breakfast, and later, tattooing her. Meanwhile, Emily's mother told investigators her daughter had often been seen with bruises, allegedly from fights over Joseph's infidelity. Police photographs taken after Joseph's arrest showed no injuries on his body, further questioning his claims of long-term abuse. Joseph spent the days after Emily's death acting as if nothing had happened, dining out, shopping, and socializing behind closed doors. He dismembered her body with a serrated saw, sealing the remains in garbage bags. On Monday morning, before driving to New Hampshire to retrieve his Jeep, he sent one final message from Emily's phone. "You're an expletive. I don't deserve this expletive." This wasn't the first violent death tied to the Fatou family. In 2009, Joseph's stepmother, young Gim Fatou, was stabbed to death in her Pennsylvania home. Although Joseph Sr. was questioned, the case remains unsolved. That same year, his massage parlor in Reading, Pennsylvania, was raided in a prostitution sting that included the arrest of a relative of young Gim. Joseph Sr. claimed he discovered his wife's body after returning from grocery shopping on December 13, 2021. After less than 2 hours of deliberation, a jury found Joseph Fatou Jr. guilty of first-degree murder for killing his wife and dismembering her body during what was supposed to be their one-year anniversary trip in October 2021. His sentencing is still pending. Case 6 begins with a frantic 911 call from 27-year-old Nicholas Fiscus, reporting an attempted home invasion gone wrong. Dispatchers had received calls from this address before. On the line, his wife Heidi can be heard briefly, then silence. 65 seconds later, Nick calls back. Dispatchers keep him talking for 7 more minutes until officers arrive. The front door was open an inch. The smell of gunpowder heavy in the air. A shotgun lay on the floor. In the kitchen, Nick sat beside Heidi's motionless body. Paramedics rushed Nick, shot through his upper left thigh, to the hospital. The wound was not life-threatening, but Heidi was pronounced dead. Nick and Heidi had been together since high school, married in 2005, and were well respected in their church and community. She was described as warm, joyful, and deeply compassionate. Police began canvassing the area. One neighbor recalled hearing gunshots and someone yelling, "You shot her. You shot me. Please, please, no." Less than 4 hours later, Nick was discharged from the hospital and brought in for questioning. He admitted the front door had been shut but not bolted. He claimed he woke to someone rattling the doorknob, grabbed his shotgun with one hand and his jeans with the other. Heidi called 911 as they moved toward the garage, a plan they'd agreed upon after a prior police visit. But as she picked up her wallet from the console table, the door burst open. Nick said the intruder grabbed the barrel, causing him to lose control. His fingers slipped on the trigger, and the shotgun fired. Heidi, who was running toward the kitchen, was hit in the back of the head and collapsed instantly. The detective noted Nick's casual tone when saying, "No, I hit her." He also gave a surprisingly detailed description of the intruder, a black male, 6'6", around 200 pounds, wearing a dark hoodie, despite claiming he barely saw the man. Investigators found the foyer undisturbed, a vase, receipts, and a beer bottle untouched. Jeans lay neatly on the floor next to the shotgun. This contradicted the chaos expected from a struggle. When asked why he didn't simply stay upstairs with the shotgun, Nick explained their plan was to escape via the garage. The detective pointed out the irony, the compassionate plan to avoid shooting. Someone had resulted in Heidi's death. Nick said he never activated the home's alarm system, even though it still worked without a paid subscription. He claimed after the second shot, which hit him in the leg, the intruder fled. Nick then dialed 911 again. It was over an hour into the interview before Nick asked about Heidi's condition, doing so passively, as if bracing for the answer rather than demanding to know. For detectives, his calm, detached demeanor deepened their doubts as Nick was taken away by ambulance. He didn't know whether his wife was dead or alive. Yet in the interview, he spoke as if he'd already assumed the worst, a surprisingly flat reaction for a husband facing the possibility of gut-wrenching loss. Then came the biggest twist. Nick casually revealed that the very next day, they were scheduled to lose their home. According to him, the plan was to pack up, move out, tell their families, and find somewhere to stay, all in a single day. This wasn't a couple living out of backpacks or a tent. They were two adults with a fully furnished house, about to be locked out with no plan in place. He explained that they'd kept their struggles hidden because they were embarrassed and too stubborn to admit they were failing. What a coincidence, then, that Heidi was murdered by an intruder just one day before the eviction, and that no one, not friends or family, had any idea about their financial situation. The question became, did Heidi even know? Once the detective wrapped up questions about the couple's personal life, he shifted back to the crime scene, particularly where and how Nick had been shot. After 3 hours of questioning, Nick had answered everything without hesitation. There was nothing concrete to charge him with. The detective handed over his card and left. Nick's family came in, and he hugged his mother, sobbing for 10 minutes. While Nick went home, lingering doubts about the so-called intruder remained. The detective had started the interview believing Nick was a victim, but by the end, he wasn't so sure. The autopsy confirmed Heidi had died instantly from a single shotgun blast to the back. The pellets shattered her ribs, severed her spine, and punctured a lung. Her family was stunned to learn of the foreclosure and insisted Heidi would have told them if she'd known. That same day, Nick lawyered up. When police asked him to help create a composite sketch of the intruder, he refused on his attorney's advice. Nearly 3 weeks later, his legal team provided their own sketch, which was released to the public, but no leads came in. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and months to years. By 2012, Nick had remarried a woman named Rachel Sanchez. They had 3 children and moved into a house purchased by Nick's parents. But Heidi's family never stopped calling the detective on her birthday, on the anniversary of her death, to remind them they hadn't forgotten. Then, 5 years later, a tip came in. Someone recognized the man in the sketch. It was Michael Pye, a remarkable resemblance. Could this have been the intruder all along? But there was one problem. Michael was in prison at the time of Heidi's murder. He couldn't have been there. Investigators realized the match was likely no accident. Michael's face had been in the news before, and it's possible Nick had simply used his image as a reference for the sketch artist. Suspicion swung squarely back to him. In 2019, Sergeant Nicole Seep of the St. Paul Police Department reopened the case. Nick's story had never made sense. He claimed he'd armed himself with a shotgun and sent Heidi downstairs ahead of him. A baffling choice if there truly was an intruder. In 5 years, Nick had never once contacted Heidi's family. The FBI reconstructed audio from her final call and found no evidence of a third person, no door opening, no struggle, nothing but a single gunshot and Heidi collapsing. Forensic testing revealed no DNA from anyone else on the gun or the doorknob, only Nick's. If there had been an intruder, they'd had to be wearing gloves the entire time. Ballistics also contradicted his account. The trajectory and distance of the shot placed Heidi in the middle of the foyer, hit at shoulder height. The struggle Nick described near the door would have disturbed the entryway table. Yet nothing was knocked over. Investigators pieced together a disturbing picture. Heidi had likely been in the dark about the foreclosure and eviction. She'd made no arrangements to move, hadn't taken time off work, and had even scheduled a pedicure and church that day. Nick had handled all communication with the bank and lawyers, telling her there was an audit over bank fraud. There was no audit. It began to look as though he had been stringing her along, concealing the truth until the very last moment, and when the eviction loomed, he chose murder over humiliation. Sergeant Seep also discovered Nick had recently divorced his second wife Rachel, and decided to reach out. Rachel admitted she'd once found a delinquent property tax notice in their home, and realized the rumors about Heidi and Nick might be true. I started to get bad feelings, Rachel recalled. The little lies made me think about Heidi, and then that letter tipped me over. This was bigger than I thought. Rachel confronted Nick and recorded the conversation. Your actions have caused me to distrust you completely, she told him. The fact that lying comes so easy makes me think you could murder your wife." In May 2021, police arrived with a warrant. "Go put your hands behind your back for me," an officer instructed. Nick asked what it was about. The reply: homicide. 11 years after Heidi's death, Nick was charged with second-degree murder, later upgraded to first-degree. Prosecutors argued that he killed to hide his financial ruin in years of lies. Richmond denied these accusations, insisting that murdering the woman he loved would do nothing to help his situation. He pointed out that even after Heidi's death, Nick was still evicted, and his financial problems were exposed for the world to see. The prosecution, however, presented compelling evidence, including the fact that only Nick's DNA was found on the gun used in the shooting. While it's true that DNA isn't always left behind, especially if hands are covered, the state argued that Nick had presumably shot Heidi a moment that could be heard in the 911 call, and then turned the gun on himself, wounding his own leg before calling for help. All of this, prosecutors claimed, happened in just 65 seconds. From the 911 audio, you can hear Heidi breathing heavily and moving, suggesting she was on her cell phone and descending the stairs alone. Nick was most likely in the living room, positioned just past a doorway. As she walked by, prosecutors alleged, he stepped out and fired. Investigators also noted there were 2 accidental misdials before Nick successfully reached 911. Were these desperate calls for help from Heidi in her final moments, or frantic mistakes by Nick? The defense maintained that an intruder could have been responsible, arguing that the lack of DNA was because the perpetrator wore gloves, and that their short time inside left little trace. They pointed to bullet spread patterns near the front door to suggest a struggle immediately upon entry, but witnesses testified there were no signs of forced entry. Contradicting Nick's story, the jury wasn't convinced by the intruder theory. On February 10th, after just 4 hours of deliberation, they found Nicholas Fergus guilty of murder beyond a reasonable doubt. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. "I do maintain, and will maintain to my dying breath, my innocence of this crime," Nick told the court. Case 7 Ed Kemper, in 1972. Police were baffled as a killer targeted female college students and repeatedly evaded capture. Towering at 6 feet 9 inches and weighing 285 pounds, Edmund Kemper was hard to miss, yet he managed to stay under the radar by befriending off-duty police officers at a bar near the courthouse, gathering whatever case details he could. With his near-genius IQ, Kemper carefully avoided suspicion. "They'd buy me a beer, I'd buy them a beer," he later recalled. Casual relationships. "I was poking around a little, trying to find things out. I knew they wouldn't share hot information, but there were little details that bothered me, how the victims were dying, or the mechanics of the investigation." Much of his knowledge came from television crime shows like Police Story, which taught him not only investigative tactics but the psychology behind them. He avoided drawing attention by never initiating conversations about the murders and resisted the temptation to attend victim memorials, something he'd seen too many killers do on TV. Santa Cruz, California, had long been a quiet beach town until the University of California, Santa Cruz, opened in 1965. The influx of students transformed the community into a more youthful, free-spirited place. But by 1972, young women began vanishing, and body parts washed ashore. The press dubbed the unknown predator the co-ed butcher. Edmund Emil Kemper III was born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California. 2 disciplinarian parents, Clarnell and Edmund Kemper Jr., the middle child and only son. He admired his father, but deeply resented his mother's harsh verbal abuse. His parents divorced when he was 9, and his father soon moved away from an early age. Kemper exhibited disturbing behavior, torturing animals, decapitating his sister's dolls, and stalking his second-grade teacher with his father's bayonet. By age 10, he buried a pet cat alive, dug it up, beheaded it, and placed the head on a spike, lying to his family about what he'd done. At 13, he killed another cat for favoring his sister, and kept its remains in his closet until his mother discovered them. When teased about not kissing his teacher, he chillingly replied, "If I kiss her, I'd have to kill her first." Kemper's size grew with age. His mother was 6 feet tall, his father 6'8", but so did his troubling behavior. His mother, fearful he might harm his sisters, locked him in the basement at night, trapping him in darkness with the floor hatch covered by a kitchen table to prevent escape. Kemper would later say it was in that basement that his hatred of women began to take root. At 14, he ran away to reconcile with his father, only to learn his father had remarried. Within months, his father sent him to live with his grandparents in North Fork, California, a move Kemper despised. He described his grandmother as emasculating and his grandfather as senile. After 10 months, an argument with his grandmother escalated. Kemper retrieved a confiscated hunting rifle and shot her at the kitchen table. When his grandfather returned from grocery shopping, Kemper killed him in the driveway, later saying he didn't want his grandfather to suffer after learning of his wife's death. Court psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, and he was committed to a Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility for the criminally insane, meant for minimal security due to his age. The placement instead exposed him to violent offenders and sexual predators, a fact Kemper would later say only made him more dangerous. The judge was so outraged by Keir's crimes that he remarked, "I'm not sending this young man to Disneyland." Instead, Keir was sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a secure psychiatric facility where most inmates were, on average, 20 years older than him. It was there, he later said, that he grew up very quickly. Keir didn't just grow up at Atascadero, he thrived. His IQ tested between 136 and 145, placing him in the top 2% of the population. He was intelligent, charismatic, and likable, which earned him a trusted position assisting the psychology staff. This role gave him access to detailed case files on murderers and sex offenders, graphic accounts of their crimes and the tactics they used to avoid capture. At just 15 years, old Keir absorbed this information firsthand. Listening to violent offenders describe their acts fed his own developing fantasies. One key detail stuck with him. Most rapists were caught because their victims survived to identify them. Keir concluded that, to be a successful assailant, he would have to leave no witnesses. He also studied the psychological assessments used to evaluate patients, memorizing answers to 28 different tests. By the time he was 21, he could manipulate results at will, knowing exactly what professionals wanted to hear. Initially diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, Keir was later reclassified, and on December 18, 1969, his 21st birthday, was released to a halfway house. Doctors advised against sending him back to live with his mother, fearing it could trigger violent behavior. But with little oversight or support, Keir eventually returned to her home. Their relationship grew even more toxic, with frequent arguments, loud enough for neighbors to overhear. After saving enough money from a job with the Division of Highways, Keir moved to Alameda to live with a friend. But his mother's unannounced visits continued, and financial struggles often forced him back to her apartment. 2 motorcycle accidents followed, one leaving him with a broken arm. A $15,000 settlement from the injury allowed him to buy a yellow Ford Galaxy, the car that would become central to his future crimes. In the early 1970s, hitchhiking was common along the California coast, especially among college students. Keir began picking up young female hitchhikers, always delivering them safely. These were his practice runs, experiments in how to gain trust, find his methods, and imagine what he could do. He later admitted he started picking women up because he was terrified of failing in relationships. "I wasn't impotent," he said, "but emotionally I was. Even just talking to a young woman scared." me, for more than a year. He refined his approach until May 7, 1972. That day, he picked up 18-year-old Fresno State students, Marianne Pess and Anita Lucisa, promising them a ride from Berkeley to Stanford. He instead drove to a remote wooded area near Alameda. There, he murdered Pess, then Lucisa placed their bodies in his trunk and began the drive home. On the way, a police officer stopped him for a broken taillight. Keir remained calm and was let off with a warning. Later, he admitted the encounter thrilled him, and that if the officer had looked in the trunk, he would have killed him on the spot. Pess's skull was found in the mountains that August. Lucisa's remains were never recovered. Keir called his first murders bumbling, saying he should have been caught within 24 hours. He wasn't, because 3 separate people saw suspicious things, but minded their own business. His next victim was 15-year-old dance student Aiko Koo, hitchhiking to class after missing her bus. Keir strangled her the same day he was scheduled for a parole review with psychiatrists. Knowing exactly what to say, he convinced them he was rehabilitated. They even recommended expunging his juvenile record. The judge disagreed, but without cause to block it. Keir walked away with a clean slate just one day after killing Koo for months. He laid low, still picking up hitchhikers and releasing them, but the constant fights with his mother reignited his urges. On January 7, 1973, Keir, living with her once again, picked up 18-year-old Cabrillo College student Cindy Shaw and shot her. Police soon connected her killing to the earlier murders, warning students to stop hitchhiking and to only accept rides from cars with university stickers. Keir easily got one through his mother's job at the college. A month later, after another fight with his mother, Keir picked up 20-year-old Alice Liu and 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe. He shot them both. While his methods varied, strangling, shooting, stabbing, smothering, his treatment of the bodies was always the same: necrophilia, rape, and mutilation. He later admitted these acts gave him ultimate control, and that he enjoyed having the corpses entirely to himself. A break in the case came months later, when a police records clerk reviewing a firearm purchase noticed that, beneath the blackout marks, she could faintly see that the buyer, Ed Keir, had a prior murder in another county. Despite his expunged record, the traces were visible by then. Keir was well known and well liked by local officers. Big Ed, as they called him, often drank with them after work at a bar called the Jury Room, just as he had charmed psychiatrists, prison staff, and others before. Edmund Kemper often spent hours chatting with police officers about guns, ammunition, and other topics of interest. While he was friendly with law enforcement, none of the officers wanted to be the one to confiscate a firearm from the towering Big Ed. Eventually, the task fell to the most junior detective in the sheriff's department, Michael Alufi. At the time, Kemper wasn't considered a suspect in any disappearances. Alufi and his partner drove to Kemper's quiet suburban home, arriving just before he returned. They explained that they needed to take his gun to verify that he was authorized to own it. Without hesitation, Kemper opened his trunk and handed it over, the firearm wrapped in a towel. Alufi noted something odd. The trunk was completely bare. With no liner though, he didn't think much of it. The gun was taken back to the station and logged away. No one suspected they had just disarmed a man who had already murdered his grandparents and 6 young women. Kemper was now preparing for what he later described as the act he had dreamed about since he was 8 years old. It was spring-April 1973. For 2 months I hadn't killed, he recalled. I told myself no more girls. It had to stop just between me and my mother. But I couldn't get away from her. We were still fighting. She still belittled me. I was like a puppet on a string. She knew every button to push, and I danced every time. That tension had even turned physical. Kemper described picking up 2 petite young women on Ashby Avenue in Berkeley as a sort of test for himself to see if he could resist temptation. The women asked if he could take them in a certain direction. but he knew it would lead straight to the area where his first two victims had been killed. All I had to do was relax, Kemper said. They would have taken me right back to their deaths. I had the same gun in the car that I'd used before, but I insisted on taking them to their college. They thanked me and got out. That was 1 week before I killed my mother. By then, he had made up his mind. She's got to die, and I've got to die, he thought, or girls like that will die. On April 20th, 1973, after returning home from a party, Clarnell Kemper, now 52 years old, woke her son when she arrived. She got into bed with a paperback novel, as she had countless nights before. "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now," she remarked. "No," Kemper replied, and said good night. Inside, he had already decided to kill her when she drifted off. He returned to her room and attacked, stabbing and bludgeoning her to death. Her last words, he later reflected, were almost painfully mundane. "I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk." Fearing that his mother's best friend, Sarah Hallett, would soon discover the body, Kemper invited her over for dinner. She happily agreed. When she arrived, he strangled her as well. He placed both bodies in a closet, then fled the area, driving more than 1,500 miles without stopping. Fueled by caffeine pills, Kemper made his way to Pueblo, Colorado. After 3 days on the road, he expected to hear news reports about the murders, but found nothing. Still, suspecting police had discovered the bodies and were on his trail, he stopped at a phone booth and began making calls. 2 weeks after Detective Alufi had visited to confiscate his gun, the Santa Cruz Police Department received a 5 a.m. phone call. It was Ed Kemper, calmly confessing to killing his mother and her friend. The officer on duty, familiar with Big Ed from casual barroom conversations at the jury room, thought it was a prank and told him to call back later. Kemper did, and again, the officers doubted him. Finally, he insisted they send Detective Alufi to his mother's home. He also confessed to the murders of 6 young women. When police arrived, the house appeared undisturbed until they lifted the mattress in Clarnell Kemper's bedroom and found it soaked with blood. Nearby was a note, "Not sloppy and incomplete. Gents, just a lack of time. I got things to do." Approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer anymore at the hands of this horrible, murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Ed Kemper was taken into custody. He seemed almost pleased with the notoriety of being a serial killer. Once arrested, he began giving long, highly detailed confessions, descriptions so graphic and pathological that even seasoned investigators were disturbed. Police soon realized why the so-called co-ed killer had eluded them for so long. While hanging out at the jury room bar with officers, Kemper had been listening to their conversations about the investigation, picking up details about their strategies, and using that inside knowledge to stay one step ahead. Experts later concluded that all of Kemper's earlier murders had been rehearsals for killing his mother. Once he accomplished that, he no longer felt the need to kill, prompting his surrender. Kemper himself gave multiple, often conflicting explanations. In one version, he claimed he thought police already knew he was the killer and murdered his mother to spare her the humiliation. In another, he said the killings no longer gave him any purpose, physical, emotional, or otherwise, and he simply called it all off. On May 7, 1973, Kemper was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. His only legal option was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. His trial began on October 23, 1973, but 3 court-appointed psychiatrists deemed him legally sane. On November 8, after just 5 hours of deliberation, a jury of 6 men and 6 women found him guilty on all counts. When asked by the judge what his punishment should be, Kemper replied that he believed he should be tortured to death. But with capital punishment suspended in California, he was instead sentenced to 8 life terms, to be served concurrently. He is currently incarcerated at the California Medical Facility. in Vacaville. Despite his crimes, Kemper has been described as a model prisoner, often entrusted with responsibilities such as scheduling inmates' psychiatric appointments. He even coordinated a volunteer program called the Blind Project, narrating more than 5,000 hours of audiobooks for visually impaired inmates. Over the decades, he has granted numerous interviews for documentaries and true crime productions always ready to relive in detail the murders that made him infamous. He has been the subject of numerous books, films, television miniseries, and even songs. Most notably, he served as the inspiration for the character of Buffalo Bill in the 1988 novel, The Silence of the Lambs. Several songs have even incorporated quotes or excerpts from his extensive interviews. In the 1970s, he also worked closely with the FBI. At that time, the Bureau had launched a project to interview serial killers in prison to better understand their psychology and identify patterns. He was among those selected. As a result of these interviews, agents identified traits that were not widely recognized before, including a common history of animal torture during childhood. One particularly chilling encounter was recalled by reporter Robert Ressler during his third interview with him at Vacaville Prison. Ressler had already visited twice before, each time accompanied by at least one other person. By the third meeting, he believed he had established enough rapport to go in alone. They spoke in a small, locked cell near death row for about 4 hours. When the interview ended, Ressler pressed the buzzer to summon a guard, but no one came. He waited a few minutes, pressed it again, and still got no response. 15 minutes passed. He pressed it a third time, but the silence remained. Trying to appear calm, Ressler continued talking, but his subject quickly noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. With a smirk, he said, "Relax. They're changing the shift, feeding the guys in the secure area." Then he stood, revealing his imposing size, and added, "Might be 15, 20 minutes before they come get you." Ressler's unease deepened when the man continued, "If I went for you right now, you'd be in a lot of trouble. I could screw your head off and set it right on the table." The realization hit hard. He was completely correct. Ressler tried to keep the conversation going, bluffing that there would be serious consequences if anything happened. The reply was cold. What could they do? Cut off my TV privileges. When Ressler suggested long-term solitary confinement, he shrugged. The notoriety of killing an FBI agent, he reasoned, would be worth far more in prison. Inside, Ressler was panicking. He even recognized, with dread, that he had fallen victim to the very phenomenon he taught others to guard against, Stockholm Syndrome. He had trusted this man enough to come alone, sticking to his training. Ressler kept talking. At one point, he said, "Surely you don't think I'd come here without some way to defend myself?" His subject shot back, "Don't expletive me. They wouldn't let you in here with a weapon." And he was right. The two verbally sparred until, at last, a guard arrived. From that day forward, the FBI implemented a strict policy. No agent would ever again interview a convicted murderer, rapist, or child molester alone. In 2015, after 42 years behind bars, he suffered a stroke, ending his volunteer work with the Blind Project. In 2019, he was declared mentally disabled, partially confined to a wheelchair, and in generally poor health. He reportedly no longer bathes, has given up on life, and suffers from diabetes, heart problems, and other ailments. He first became eligible for parole in 1979, but was denied that year, and every year until 1982. Between 1985 and 2017, he faced 9 more parole hearings, waiving his right to 4 of them, and being denied in the rest. At his 1988 hearing, he admitted, "Society is not ready in any shape or form for me. I can't fault them for that." In 2007, the prosecutor stated bluntly, "We don't care how much of a model prisoner he is, because of the enormity of his crimes." His next parole hearing is set for 2024. when he will be 76 years old. One statement of his still stands out, echoing the unsettling words of Austrian criminal Joseph Fritzl. Asked how many others might be committing crimes like his, he said, "I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who's been a murderer for almost 20 years. Can you say how many people might be doing what I was doing? It would be a guess, but it's far more than 35. It's not that impossible in this society. It happens. Are there more people? They didn't give up. I did. I came in out of the cold. And there are people who prefer it in the cold. In the end, the question remains, was Ed Kemper born to kill? Or did his environment create him? The debate over nature versus nurture continues among scientists, criminologists, and psychologists. What most experts agree on, however, is that Kemper is a textbook sociopath. Everything is about him. He feels no guilt and has no compassion. But was he born that way, or shaped into it? As he once said himself, "I need to believe that something in me is salvageable."